Hey guys, I'm Attila Bartha, and I work at IBM Cloud, or IBM, on the cloud project. And I'm a tech lead, but that is not really important. And I'm here today to talk about core web vitals, basically web performance. And it's going to be an introduction, so don't expect too much. I know more about the topic than, or maybe less, than I have on my slides, so feel free to ask questions. It's going to be short and sweet, and I apologize in advance because there will be a lot of 3-letter, 4-letter, 1-letter abbreviations that will mean maybe a lot to you, maybe nothing. So we'll see. We'll get through this together. So what are web vitals, right? That is probably the first question. So it's the Chrome developer team at Google. This is their new recommendation for measuring performance. It's a collection of metrics. Can you see that? Sorry. It's a collection of metrics that they recommend for you to measure, keep track of in your analytics, to know if your users are having good experience or a bad experience or just a mediocre experience, which is all the web probably. It's new and improved. Changed, their approach changed a bit in the last couple of years. You see a lot of letters there. You see a lot of older metrics there that they used to promote, that you should measure these and you should keep track of them, and they will tell you how your users are perceiving your website, your web application. But it was really not user-centric. It was really hard to understand which of these numbers correlate to the user having a good time versus a user having a bad time. Returning to your website, putting more things in their shopping cart, etc. So you probably are familiar with some of them, or maybe all of them. They define different times in your web pages or website's life cycle. So for example, I don't want to necessarily go through the list, but for example, time to first byte is the time it took for the first byte to reach your client, usually your browser basically, on your mobile device or on your desktop, etc., etc. One of the interesting ones maybe is, which I will talk to you about later, is for first contentful paint, which is when was the first time that any pixel showed up on your screen, and time to interactive, which is how much time it took, usually parsing JavaScript or parsing something, HTML, CSS, etc., and downloading it, for the user to be able to do anything on your website, right? Like fill out a form field, which we usually do. And then the total blocking time is just, you can see the big algorithm there, very complicated algorithm, how it's calculated. Another popular one is speed index, which is used by a lot of third-party providers, app providers, like SpeedCurve. They tried something similar that the Chrome developer team tried, which is just give you a number. And if this number is bigger than 10, then you're good. If it's smaller than 10, then you're not that good. It has its merit. It's very useful. Thank you for that question. But it's still not enough, and we'll see. Maybe we'll see later why. So the new metrics, the new and shiny metrics: largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift. I should have put a little asterisk after the last one, but I will talk a bit about that one later. So largest contentful paint is the time to kind of like understand your loading performance. So how people perceive the moment they click on a link in Google search to the moment that something shows up on their screen. And they put largest in there because usually it matters not only if your header is loaded, usually pretty useless, but the largest part of your screen. Like that's something that, in their opinion, and actually correlates to my opinion, it's a good indicator for how I perceive a web page's loading performance. The next one is the first input delay, which is trying to measure the interactivity of your website, how much time it took from the page loading to me being able to, or your users being able to interact with it. So filling out a form field, whatever that might be, right? Like open the menu, etc. And then the last one is the shift, the cumulative layout shift, which is supposed to measure how stable your visual experience is when you're using something. So how much it jumps around, how janky it is, etc. I said that I should have put an asterisk next to it because this is one of the web vitals that actually changed a bit since it was introduced. Which might be true for all of the items or any of the items later in the future. They try to do some kind of annual cadence where they might update these metrics to better represent the user's feeling or user's perception about your website. But the last one is the one that changed the most in the last couple of years, because they used to add up all the layout shifts on your website, and now they are just focusing on the biggest layout shifts. So if you've been measuring that and you see some differences between 2 years ago and today, don't necessarily get alarmed. They have recommendations how to mitigate that. Okay, cool. So yeah, I talked a bit about this because this is the most complicated metric. And this is what, on the left-hand side, you can see what it does actually to your user. Maybe you caught it, maybe you didn't. Somebody ordered something they didn't want. And this happens to me all the time on a lot of web pages, especially the ones that have ads. That's why I hate ads. On the other side, on the right-hand side, you can see how this is calculated. If you're interested, maybe I don't want to bore you with this. You maybe haven't drank enough to know what this means. But basically, the time that you spend on a website is built out of these little sessions where things are loading and things are jumping around on the screen. And they try to give you the number of the biggest little time frame that you have. So in our case, probably this one, or maybe this one, adds up to the biggest maximum time, maximum shift that a user perceived or user saw on your website. So these are the takeaway is these are the letters that you have to memorize. Tattoo it on your forehead, name your dogs this way, etc. And they basically try to say the questions or try to answer the questions. When will I finally see something? I really want this website to load. That's the LCP. When can I start using it is the first input delay. And what is wrong with this page? I bet that it's ads is the CLS that I would translate them like this. They also give you guidance around what good looks like, right? So you started measuring these things, but what is good? Like you might not have an idea of why, how much in the largest contentful paint, like how many seconds is good. So it's very, very helpful, very nice way to, basically if you're measuring these things, you can draw little lines that if we are above that, then we are fine and we are good. There are other metrics. As I said, like all of the web vitals will be user-centric, so they will never extend it to something that doesn't really represent what the user sees. That's the problem of TBT, and probably you already know what TBT and TTI and TTFBs are. Those are the problems that they really are not exchangeable. But as I said before, they promise to not update this every day so that you go crazy. So how do you go about measuring this? Obviously, it's going to be very easy, as you can imagine. There are a lot of tools out there. Probably you have used some of these, like web page test would be probably the most famous. Chrome DevTools supports this as well. Lighthouse CI, so you can implement it in your CI/CD process. These are, and the Web Vitals Chrome extension. On the left-hand side, these are all tools that you can use while you're delivering something, while you're developing something in your pipeline. But both Chrome and in my experience as well, the Chrome developer team and in my experience as well, that it's better if you measure it out in the field because the numbers will be different. it's really hard to simulate a low-end device. It's really hard to simulate when your battery is 10% charged, etc. So I vote for the right-hand side, and hopefully you will find a tool that works for you. The first three things are Google products. I will not, promote them more. I think they have enough promotion as it is. The last one is an open source library by Google, so maybe I'm cheating there a bit, but I do have actually experience with that one. It's amazing, especially if you have a single page application, and I want to talk a bit about that, because most of the things that I said is more about here's a website, a document that I just downloaded, and now I can interact with it, now I can see it. But it's less true for single-page applications where I go around the website and I try to do something and the site jumps around, etc. So for those situations, these JavaScript libraries, these little manually instrumentable, which is a mouthful, code snippets can come in very, very handy. You know your site best, you know what you want to measure, you know when you want to trigger those measurements, and that's where these libraries come in handy, like the Web Vitals one. And as you can see, it's pretty easy to instrument. This code snippet will wait for all of these metrics to be gathered, and after that call the callback that is provided, you can do anything with it. You can just console log it if that's what you prefer, for nobody to see it ever again, or you can send it to Google Analytics as the example shows, or to your server. This is what the Chrome extension looks like. This is really neat while you are developing something. You can install it and basically shows like, no, don't do that. No, that's not a good idea. It's red. That's the simplified version at least. So you can deep dive into each of these metrics and see what is going on. And you can even learn more and get some good knowledge about why might this happening to me or to my website. Under the hood, almost everything. So they use APIs that are web standards. So there's no black magic, there's nothing going on really sneaky. Performance Observer is probably the most used one, which triggers events like first input or largest contentful paint or layout shift that you can listen to in your own code and do the same thing as the library does whenever you want to. Maybe you want to put it in the service worker, maybe you want to wait for the user to be idle a bit. One caveat though, or one thing that you have to remember is that especially on mobile, if the browser tab is not active, it's not focused, there are a lot of things that on different devices will not happen. So some devices will actually not execute any JavaScript that you want. Therefore, you can do analytics when the tab is not focused. So be careful, be mindful of that. Some of the best practices is to measure 75 percentile of your users so that you get a statistically significant metric. Put it in a CI/CD pipeline, even if it's just lab data. Obviously, as I said, prefer the RAM metrics because they will tell you how or what kind of devices people actually use and what is their actual experience versus on my laptop, it's pretty pricey, it looks okay, and it works fine. And I'm on Wi-Fi, etc. So attach it to your analytics if you can and try to version it. Just because something is measured later in time, it might still use an older version of your website. So putting the version of your actual website into the analytics is a very good practice. And the last thing, the visibility change, what I mentioned, that some of these performance metrics are best measured when the visibility of your tab, of your app basically changes so that you don't lose data, essentially. And that's about it. That was me. Thanks.